Hey, it's your boy, Sriracha Plinky, and welcome back to Discographies, yes, where I'll be spoiling every Yes album ever. Now, after the band's Open Your Eyes tour, Igor Korshev had joined the lineup full-time as the keyboardist, meaning that guitar duties were going to be shared by both Billy Sherwood and Steve Howe. I wonder how that dynamic would turn out. During the tour, they got in touch with producer Bruce Fairbairn, who had previously worked with Bon Jovi and Aerosmith, among other rock artists. And they got along really well during the initial talks, and so agreed to work together on a follow-up album, relocating to Vancouver to record it. The new album was collaboratively written by everyone, which didn't happen really on Open Your Eyes. And that album eventually became The Ladder, the title of which was inspired by Yoko Ono's art installation piece project, where you have to climb a ladder and look through a magnifying glass to see Yes written on the ceiling. Oh, and Roger Dean came back to make this fantastic artwork and finally made the square logo the only logo on the cover. Likewise, the music on the album was largely an attempt to return to 70s sensibilities, though it has a lot of modern touches as well. Anyway, towards the completion of mixing and recording, producer Bruce Fairbairn suddenly died of a heart attack, and after a brief period of mourning, they reconvened and finished off the album with the assistance of engineer Mike Plotnikov. The latter ended up being dedicated to Bruce Fairbairn. So, how does the music on The Ladder stack up when compared to their previous works? Well, let's get into it. It opens with Homeworld, The Ladder, which was actually a track that was made to be used in the real-time strategy PC game Homeworld. It played during the closing credits, but for the remastered version, they cut out that song and replaced it with something vague and spacey. So there you go. Anyway, it started off with some rather spooky soundscapes from keyboards, and some matchbox shaking and eerie fade-in notes on a guitar. Then the unsureness subsides, and Sherwood comes in with a delightfully quirky yet serious guitar bit establishing the mood of the song. It's full of phaser, I think, is the effect, which is an effect that reappears all across this album. Howe continues to play some notes. So this seems to be the dynamic reached by the two guitar players. Sherwood mostly plays the rhythm, while Howe plays lead, so it's not too much different than Open Your Eyes in that sense. At this point, the rhythm and feel of the groove reminds me of Man in the Moon off the previous album. Anyway, the rest of the band come in pretty soon, and the mood is really cool and still kind of mysterious. They do this great instrumental bit led by joint bass and guitar that's like... It's tastefully easygoing, but heavy too. Those mystical soundscapes from the beginning continue to make their presence known now and again, and they show up very lightly in the background, and I didn't notice that until like last week when I was listening to this album, so it's a nice touch, very subtle. It's a quite dense arrangement that sounds very rich, full of body and character. The melody is strong and the delivery is confident. The harmonies likewise are very tight, and largely because of Sherwood's contributions. The choruses feature a nice little contemporary ooh, ah in the backing vocals. Verse 2 does something interesting as Korshev plays chords on the mellotron choir, and it's a great mixing of old world and new. Steve continues to run around aimlessly, and I'm doing my best not to focus on that point. The mixing is all around top-notch, and the overall structure of the piece is very solid, very thoroughly composed. At around 4 minutes in, they switched things up a lot with a fresh and speedy 6/8 section, filled with some great organ work from our resident Igor, bringing back the fire of 70s keys. This section also allows Chris Squire to flex a bit, because for all the other parts of this extended track, he really doesn't do much of note and stays pretty subdued. This section builds up in intensity with the help of more and more backing vocals until it quite seamlessly transitions back into the chorus section, which then leads into a lengthy cycle of the chorus theme, now fleshed out even further by many different synth leads, with Igor trying out lots of various sounds. It all descends after a while into a very gentle instrumental led by acoustic guitar strumming. It's a very dreamy section that I did not see coming, given what came before it. Then that cuts away, and we are treated by one final verse from John on vocals, accompanied by Korshev on piano. It's a lovely melody and is a great mood, very logical in that the melody uses rhythmic patterns very effectively, making this little isolated bit flow naturally and harmoniously. And it ends with this little descending major scale, a cross between two tonalities. Very nice. And with this little mini ditty, the song ends. It's over 9 minutes and is indeed evocative of classic 70s yes, while still exploring modern techniques and soundscapes. Next up is It Will Be a Good Day, The River. Yay, The River finally gets its own standalone song. Anyway, the opening is a panning, cycling two-note motif of the koto sound, I think, on the keyboard. And it does some extreme ping-pong-like panning. This is a pretty short track and feels a lot like a good old conventional love song. Lots of sequences and patterns in the melody that add to the refined conventionality of the music. It'll be a good day. Let's cut that out, okay? There's a key change from verse to chorus to switch things up a bit, but the simplistic repetition of patterns continues. Making me breathe again. Making me free again. Like a river. Nice melodies both from vocals and guitar, with the guitar coming into the foreground for short instrumental post-chorus bits. Alan White and Chris Squire keep things really simple in the back line, with a very simple 4/4 beat accompanied by a steady pulsing bass line. Squire and Sherwood come in to deliver some backing vocal counter melodies in the chorus. Come tomorrow, destiny, take the river to the sea. It's a very hopeful and uplifting track, and the final run of courses is quite climactic, and it's a very pleasant song, and is how I would describe it. It's sincere and loving. Next up is Lightning Strikes, which opens up with a sample of the opening flute bit from the song Phenomenal Cat by The Kinks, which was sampled by Igor and played on the Mellotron. We then get like 2 bars of a typical generic Mellotron bossa nova sample, and then into the proper song we go. Driven by Howe on classical guitar strumming away in 7/4 time, this is the basis of the song. When John comes in on vocals, damn, he really sounds great. You can clearly hear the vocal treatment he's getting, and it's very lively, filled with reverb and delay. And after one verse of just John and Steve, the full band jump in, and we're in for a surprise. My god, the kick drum is a synth kick drum that like one would hear in late 90s techno or something. And it's incredibly forceful and punchy. It's really unexpected, and this nice fresh sound is complemented by the thoroughly vintage-sounding mini-moog like solo before the next verse comes in. And with the next verse, we get the hi-hat beat, and it legit turns the song into a... The melody is quite lovely and jovial, and in the vocal-free breaks, a brass band, the Margarita Horns, fill in the spaces with a... This is so bizarrely different from anything they've made yet, but I think they pulled it off wonderfully. One lyric in the second verse, I think, includes the line, face to face, which is actually a call forward, or a flash forward, would you say, to a song that will appear later on. The chorus is more intense, as expected, but has a melody that's less significant than the verses, so it makes an interesting switch over from the typical, and turns the verses into the catchy section rather than the chorus. After a couple of couplets, they transition into the bridge of the song that changes things up a lot. Firstly, it changes to a 6/8 time signature, and also the techno beat is replaced by Alan's very real drum kit. And Squire really comes forward and commands this section while vocals sing, "Yeah, he said coming together, touching my spirit, touching my feeling, yeah, he said..." Of course, this classic Rickenbacker is on full display, chugging away with its crisp and bassy tone, and maintains its strong presence up until the very end of the section where everyone cuts out for a bar, except Squire, who comes forth and does an exhilarating bar-long bass solo. And a single snare strike ushers in the rest of the band. What an incredibly exciting moment. Like, legit, my heart skips a beat in this bit. Anyway, after one more chorus, the song kind of comes full circle and closes with an outro from John and Steve that is very much like the intro. And the final sustained chord bleeds into the next track. Can I? Which is a minute and a half. It features some world instrumentation, including a didgeridoo, and John singing his John Anderson language jargon. Then from out of nowhere, we get a reworking of We Have Heaven off their 1971 Fragile album. Can I is kind of a reimagining of We Have Heaven in a way. A new version of that same sort of idea, I guess, in an effort to link back to their glory days, maybe. And this happens a few times on the album, and of course, linking back to previous songs of theirs is kind of a thing that they do from time to time. But on this album, it feels like they're paying too much tribute to their older works, because they're well aware that they're great, and by recalling back to those great numbers, I just can't help but feel like they're conceding that they can't make something that good again. There's plenty of great tracks on the album, and I think it's pretty strong, and it would have benefited it not to include those tributes, I think, and just ends up being distracting. Like, what is this? Is this new music or not? Anyway, John continues to make jungle noises with his mouth and gets accompanied by some world percussion and soft warm pads. The finish of the song fades into the intro of the next track, Face to Face. It blasts into existence with a funky-ass synth sequence. I just love what Khrushchev brought to the table. Lots of new interesting sounds, and really bringing Yes into the 21st century, while still paying tribute to their analog synth and mellotron and organ roots. So this keeps looping away, and then we get an accordion joining in on the fun. Like, whoa, this is new. And when the full band jumps in, the song develops this almost Caribbean feel to the music. The verses largely only have a 4-on-the-floor drum pattern, and Chris once again gets to flex on us with a delightfully quirky bass line based on a descending major scale. The melody is pretty good, and the sunny electric guitar accompaniment phasing away in the back, played by Billy, I'd say, only adds to the warmth of the piece. At the end of the verse, John exclaims, "Come on, Steve!" And Steve does a solo, and oh boy is it bad. Bunch of notes, not quite sure what he was going for here. And just like in Lightning Strikes, the chorus is not as distinctive melodically, or in this case, instrumentally, as the verse. I mean, it's still fine, but the verses are stronger, I'd say. At least the first half of the chorus is kind of unnoteworthy, because this song has a double chorus structure, so the first half goes like, "We began on the very first spring that the promise would come when the promise was made." And the second half gets really intense and reintroduces the opening synth looping, and the drums go back to the 4-on-the-floor pattern while also incorporating some stellar tom fills, and the vocals and guitars in unison play off the melody. Lift me up, shake me up, face to face. Lift me up, stick me up, face to face. It's very climactic and powerful, and it's so awesome. And they basically repeat what's happened so far once again, with some building up and changes to the bass line to make it more distinctive. And it finishes on a resounding face to face, face to face, face to face. And I'd say it's one of the most outstanding tracks on the whole album, with everyone's playing full of energy and exhibiting a youthful exuberance not seen in a long while. For the next track, If Only You Knew, the band take things back to the loving ballad nature of It Will Be a Good Day again, and honestly sounds too much like it maybe. I mean, I think both songs are pretty much equally as good. Just a little unfortunate that they both have the same sort of feel and groove. The arrangement also sounds a lot alike, and a different treatment of the instrumental parts would have helped to distinguish the two songs apart. The recurring pattern from the verses, which gets repeated by an instrumental section consisting of acoustic guitar and maybe Portuguese guitar, as well as maybe a mandolin-like instrument, is really lovely. The whole song is lovely, as is the point, because it's a love song, probably the most earnest, no-nonsense love song they've ever done. John Anderson wrote it for his wife Jane, so it makes sense that it really is heartfelt. The chorus lyrics are a bit cheesy, but it's kind of expected in a song like this. Chris and Billy deliver some delightful counter melodies in the back, filling up the sonic space. Solid arrangements once again, and Steve Howe comes out for some brief guitar interludes, but he doesn't get a chance to improv, and so sticks to a melody, and it's pretty nice. Anyway, for the bridge, things change up a lot with a fresh new section led by synth strings and some classical sounding bass runs, without any drums for a large part. The string patch especially sounds very interesting, very bitey, and of course unnaturally so, but it works here. It doesn't fade in like typical string sounds, but rather has a choppy effect. It's nice. Anyway, the closing chorus is like the ones before it, and the song finishes with some nice phasery electric grand piano chords at the end. Very refreshing, pleasant song. Next up is To Be Alive, Hep Yada. Gosh, they really love the whole optional title in parentheses thing on this album, don't they? The song opens with guitar, I think, mimicking something like a sitar, or perhaps it's an electric sitar actually. It's a very simple pattern that's going to continue into the verses as well. Some very processed also enter the arrangement occasionally. And once the drums start up, you get a resounding feel of what the song is going to be. Another sort of love ballad again, though this one has a quicker pace than the ones before. There's a synth sax solo at the opening instrumental, as if this track needed any more cheese. John's lines are a bit word salady. There's lots of words coming out of his mouth, and he tries to fit them all into the music with mixed results. Also, his voice sounds a bit unsure of itself on this one. It's more noticeable in To Be Alive than in other tracks, I think. The verse features cross-stick beats rather than a full-on snare hit, and that adds to the gentleness of the music. Things start getting more climactic and intense with the pre-chorus. Very cool motif with Anderson singing, "Everybody wants some," and backing vocals mostly from Billy, and maybe even Igor too, I'm not sure, sing something like, turn it up, filling in the gaps of John's melody. And the intensity only amps up with the chorus. Squire plays a bass line based on an ascending sequence, and he does this an awful lot actually, creating a simple sequence that accompanies a more complex arrangement surrounding it. I'm not feeling it this time. It's too simplistic, and maybe they take it to a place that it shouldn't have gone to. Yeah, I get it, it's a cool idea, but I don't think it was accomplished all that greatly here. The backing vocals sing, yeah, all the way through, and it's a pretty nice feeling. Then, nobody. John Anderson. Oh! It doesn't sit well with the rest of the music, and just occasionally John comes out with a really loud "Oh!" Doesn't get much better than this. Oh! And it would have been a perfectly fine chorus if it wasn't for John's rude intrusions. Anyway, the next couplet follows much like before, with no real bridge to speak of, except for a short middle eight led by Steve's slidey guitar solo based on the chorus motif. Then back into the final set of choruses, with John singing the titular Hep Yada in endless loop fashion. This used to be my favorite song off the album back in the good old days. I'm not sure why. I think it has some nice musical concepts, the arrangement especially, but most of the troubles stem from the vocals, I'd say. Both the lyrics and the dodgy delivery. Anyway, we can move past this and go to Finally, which opens up very strong with runs led by guitars starting things off at a high point right away. And then John starts singing. I don't really get it. Between this track and the one before it, it's like night and day. Legit, John has rarely sounded better, and his delivery is absolutely amazing here. And he exhibits a grittiness that usually isn't present in his voice. He had said that he tried smoking some herbs or something to add some texture to his voice, and maybe this is a result of that. Not sure what were the circumstances behind the recording process and why exactly is his voice so different from track to track. But there you go. And the first song section is actually the chorus, so we're really just jumping right into this. No time wasted building things up here. It's a solid sounding beat with an interesting 6/4 feel. The chorus has lots of huge harmonies while the verses don't. And so the verses let you hear Anderson's solo voice very clearly, and you can appreciate it in all of its gritty glory. After the second chorus, they transition into a new linking section that starts off intense but limited in instrumentation with just John singing. I can feel the earth moving, moving. I can feel the sky falling, falling, falling. And synth strings keep the beat. Instruments build up, with Chris keeping his bass line simple with just a pulsing root note thing while everyone around him moves around. The lyrics get you pumped and ready for action, and it's an amazing climactic buildup of voices and instruments. And after that concludes, we get a naturally occurring guitar solo from Steve, which is not bad, honestly. And after another chorus, the band returned to the I can feel the earth moving thing. It's very much the same as the one before, but the first one had better lyrics. After this climaxes, a little over 3 minutes in, the song kind of ends, and a new section opens up with slow mellow strings and soft guitar strumming, and some analog type synth melodies too. The vocal line, I can feel the rain coming, returns, but it's been reimagined and reinvented. I can feel the rain coming. After some beatless verses, the drums come back utilizing a quarter time beat, with the first beat alternating between kick and snare. The snare is soaking wet with reverb, creating a nice vintage feel. There's lots of instrumental noodling here, and it's pretty nice actually. So this song is in a sense in two halves, and after the second theme gets thoroughly explored, the instruments fall away, leaving just the guitar to finish the song with some strummed chords. It's a very nice piece, both full of energy and tender care. Next up is The Messenger, a song written in tribute to Bob Marley. The track begins with a strong lead from bass, exhibiting that classic Rickenbacker sound. And this riff continues into the verses. Joint guitar work from Steve and Billy, with Steve doing a little light acoustic solo and Billy providing guitar rhythm. I like how they both have their own roles and styles and don't really just double up on each other, and they contribute to different things all the time. It's a cool mood, and the laid-back feel of the verses nicely transitions into a more forceful feel for the chorus, with the help of the pre-chorus that begins escalating things. And then eventually we get to the chorus. We gotta stand, two together, keep the message alive! Together! The snare shows up in the pre-chorus and chorus, and is not seen really in the verses. Also in the chorus, there's a lovely rhythm pattern filling up the space coming from the right cymbal, rather than the hi-hat that was present in the verses. It's a nice change of sound between the sections. After a couple of couplets, the band get into a fiery solo battle between guitar and keys. Nice and groovy all around. At around 4 minutes, the song kind of changes and concludes this particular theme, and like in the previous track, the mood changes to a more subdued but faster acoustic guitar-led rhythm. One world, one touch, one voice, one life. It doesn't last very long, and honestly, I would have liked it to have gone on a bit longer. I think it's only around for a minute, and I was enjoying it. They could have fleshed it out a bit more and developed it further, but it ends where it do. It's a pretty nice track too. Now we get to the penultimate track, which is in a way the true climax of the album. New Languages. Runs from organ open the track, with Steve on guitar mimicking the organ pattern. Then drums, bass, and Billy on guitar chime in, playing in unison, a compositional trait that I haven't really seen in a long while. And after exploring this run motif for a few runs, the full band properly start things off and rock out an awesome groove played in unison by the guitars and bass, with White keeping things fiery with a 4 on the snare type beat. The riff sounds great, but in the second half, it's all like single repeated notes, like and it just feels like they ran out of creativity halfway through, and it's a little distracting, but it's still okay. Korshev brings the goods with lots of mellotron and organ work, especially the chugging kind of organ. After lots of tasty runs from that riff, that section disappears and the final held strike leads right into the song proper, which starts with gentle chords on phasery keys. John joins quickly, and he's back to his old kind of alright voice. I mean, he doesn't sound terrible, but just at points sounds like he's struggling to reach notes. And I'm like, just how exactly did he record finally the way he did? Anyway, this main section has a more conventional sound, more in line with the likes of It Will Be a Good Day and If Only You Knew. The lyrics are a bit of a word salad again. The arrangement is delightfully quirky and happy sounding. The pre-chorus gets all serious though, all of a sudden, and cycling tinkly synths only add to the mysterious nature of the music. Mystery turns to hope in the chorus. Chris and Billy do the latter trademark backing vocal countermelody thing, belting out, "Talk to me." It's all pretty cool. Meanwhile, John gets screechy at times. Just doesn't sound all that confident in his delivery. But the mood is pretty cool, and there's a guitar solo after the first chorus that's pretty good, but of course could be better. The next verse follows much like the one before, but the pre-chorus adds a cool little thing where samples of vocal stabs pan around from left and right. And after the second chorus, at around 6 minutes something, the song sort of ends, like many tracks before it, and transitions into a joint electric and acoustic guitar strumming riff that's faster than the section that came before it. It's definitely intriguing, and I'm curious to see where this is going. And where it goes is a copycat of Roundabout. Legit, it's the same tempo, beat, and key. And the first half of the bass riff is identical to the iconic Roundabout bass line. How noodles out an acoustic guitar solo throughout that's really not good, and messy, cluttered, and unfocused. Again, like at some other points before it feels like they're paying tribute to their former greatness rather than just leaving the past remain where it is and making some new greats. Anyway, there's a dreamy transition into a very chill groove that kind of came out of nowhere, and the slowed down bass riff carries you away. It feels very new, but when you wonder about what's coming next, they seamlessly transition into the pre-chorus, and subsequently, the final chorus of the song. It's a nice move. It finishes up pretty swiftly after that with a single note on a synth choir that then changes to one step above it, making you feel like there's something more coming. But there isn't. It's over 9 minutes long, and definitely exhibiting a more classic Yes feel, though of course not as tight as something from Fragile or Close to the Edge. We then get to the final track, which is the understated 9 voices Long Walker. It opens with some nice strumming from Steve Howe's Moroccan Vahalia, creating this vibe that is reminiscent of I've Seen All Good People, and with good reason, as you will see later. The song is about the longest walk, which was a spiritual walk led by the American Indian movement in 1978 to raise awareness for some anti-Native American legislation. The melody is quite interesting, and the chord progression is kind of unexpected, from Yes at least. It has a sort of Beatles-esque quality that is further accentuated by a very Beatles-esque mellotron flute chord progression that comes in a little bit into the song. Instrumentation remains pretty lax, just the Spanish flute and John singing for the most part, though we eventually do get some Indian percussion and sitar noodling, which is pretty nice and all, but this is the Indians of America that we're talking about in this song, not the Indians of India, so I don't quite know what the percussion and sitar are supposed to represent. Maybe they don't represent anything and are just there to make the track sound more ethnic. Anyway, the melody increases in hopefulness and intensity as the song progresses, and it sounds great, especially during the chorus sections. This voice, this dialogue, this voice, singing as one. Towards the end, they do a callback to your move in the backing vocals and do a couple of runs of just like in a couple of songs before in this album, conceding that the way to make this song more powerful is by reminding their audience of better days. For shame. Anyway, pretty short track of around 3 minutes. It's nice and pleasant enough, and it resolutely closes the album. So, the latter, it has some great tunes, more in line with what I guess a 70s Yes would do in the late 90s. Korshev shows off his great skill of combining the old world of synths with the new, thereby paying tribute to the olden times while helping to bring the band into the 21st century, as I said before. John's voice is kind of uneven throughout the album. Finally sounds amazing, and no doubt one of his best performances, while other tracks show the wear and tear of growing old. Squire also shines in some tracks, showing a very youthful energy while remaining very poppy and basic in other tracks when needed. The production is excellent. It sounds great, and there's a really nice balance between fast-paced and slow tracks, lengthy, complex, and proggy, and love ballad poppy. This one's got it all. So I'm gonna give it an 8.0 out of 10. Nice. Nice. The album was released in September 1999, and it reached the top 40 album charts in the UK, I think, and the top 100 in the US, and so it fared a lot better than their previous effort. They went on to tour with the album later that year, and then after the latter tour, Billy Sherwood left the band, leaving it as a classic 5-piece. Then in 2000, Yes did the Masterworks tour, in which they played some of their most classic tracks from 1971 to 1974. During the tour, Igor Korshev was charged with sexual assault and battery against 2 female security guards. The matter was settled out of court, but it resulted in him being kicked out of the band. So now, with the band left as a diminished form of its former self once again, they found a way to move on and made something quite different from their previous efforts on their 2001 album, Magnification. So join me in 2 weeks' time when I'll be talking about their next album effort and all the fun that it entails. So like and subscribe for more music reviews and original music. Special thanks to my patrons, and if you're interested in contributing, there's links to my music and Patreon in the description below. Thanks again. See you around.